Hey guys, you're hearing some grinding sounds. I've been promising you I would do this tutorial for a while. This is going to be on active tiles. And I'll forewarn you, we're only going to scratch the surface here. I'm going to show you some, basic common use cases like, creating items that you can pick up and automating teleports with extra flair. We're going to do other things like traps. But the power of the system created by Iron Monk, and he's got a bunch of really great modules out there that you should check out. But Monk's Active Tiles is, I think, a real game changer. It has the ability to recreate with more flexibility a lot of things that you're using modules for today, but to go way beyond that. And the other thing it can do for us is for those of us who aren't going to learn JavaScript and learn how to really make macros, it creates an interface that essentially you can do and create the things that you would normally do with a macro, even a very complex macro. You can do that through active tiles, and it uses the tile itself as the sort of trigger point or trigger mechanism. So that's what we're going to go through today. We will spend some time on everything that's possible, but we'll only scratch the surface there, and we'll jump deep dive into a couple of common use cases. I won't go into the advanced stuff that it can do today because frankly I'm still learning it. Maybe I'll even have Iron Monk on one of these times, and we'll do an active build session using active tiles. But that's it. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So let's go through a quick walkthrough of some of the options available. I just want to show you sort of high level what are kind of all the things that you can do. So first I'm going to grab a tile so that we can use that. I've actually created some active tiles for those of you who are on my Patreon, and we'll use these tiles just as examples. Of course, you can use any tile. I just wanted these because I wanted to build automation into a scene and be able to hide it and move it around and sort of unencumber myself from the tiles themselves that might make up the scene. So let's open this up and let's look at some of the options. So just to walk through the basic UI, first you have to activate the tile if you want it to actually work. And if you notice here, if I right click the tile, I've also got some new buttons here. And if I click on this, you can see it's also activating or deactivating. This is a quick way to activate or deactivate a tile. You can have it active for all tokens, only player tokens, or GM tokens. You can have it activate when anyone walks through, or just a player, or just the GM. And then this is super helpful, like when something enters or exits. If something enters or exits, the same, either condition can be true. When something moves into the tile or basically over the tile, including dragging over the tile. When a token that's selected then clicks on that tile. You can also do hover in and hover out, which is relatively new. It's got some limitations at the moment on it. And then you can manually activate the tile, which essentially just relies on this button right here. So this button will trigger the tile. If there was commands here and I press this button, it would trigger. And that just gives you, as the GM, sort of maximum control if you don't want any other things to automatically trigger it. And one tile can trigger another tile, and you can have it cascade, and you can have all sorts of things. You can build control panels on a scene that can do things and activate things on the scene for you. So I want you to unencumber your mind here, because this isn't something that we've had the power to do so easily before now. You can also have things only happen once per token, in case you don't want it to be an effect that will keep triggering. You can have it just isolate that token one time. You can have a certain number of tokens have to enter the space or trigger the tile in whatever way it gets triggered before it'll trigger. So if you want your whole party to walk through a room, for example, and your party is 6, you could set it to 6, and as they pass through, it'll counter or it'll count up those triggers, and then finally trigger the tile when the 6th person does it. And then a chance to trigger. This is where you can introduce some randomness in case you'd like to do that. There's a really cool thing that Pyram King did recently where he had a big map where there was like random hotspots that you could walk into, and using something like chance to trigger might be a cool mechanic to make that work. Now let's jump into the real meat and the brains of it, and that's here in this actions tab, or this actions section. And when I open this up, you'll see there are a lot of actions that you can automate, and some of these are extremely powerful. So activate and deactivate, that will activate or deactivate things like lights, things that are activatable, if you will. You can drop in a light, you can, I'll just show you what that looks like. In fact, I'll just use one of these lights. You go to your crosshairs, you pick the light, and it will find that light's ID within the scene, and it'll target that. You can also target the actual tile that you're on as a way of activating or deactivating. And you can both activate, deactivate, you can toggle it, or you can pull from previous action. We won't go into previous actions in this tutorial because that's more of an advanced type of thing. You can also initiate active effects. So sleep, bleeding, blessed, all these kinds of things. I believe that has a module dependency to make that work. You can add or remove the effect, or you can toggle it on or off. And you'll notice some other things here. You can not only select an entity for it to add the effect to, but you could have it be the token that walked in and actually triggered the tile. You can have it be the tokens that are within the tile perimeter that actually get the effect. You can have it just target player tokens within the scene. And then there's some other things here where you can use data from a previous action. Again, really powerful stuff that we won't get into today. Besides active effects, you can add an item. And the way you add an item is you just go to your crosshairs, you go to your item tab, and you pick it, and it will select that item, and it will then give that to a player or multiple players, whoever you want to have do that. And you'll notice some of these have delays too. You can delay some of the actions for any number of seconds. We can add to combat, so you can pick all of your players or certain tokens, add them to combat automatically. Maybe they walk into a place they shouldn't, and all of a sudden the shopkeeper becomes a combatant. You can alter things. You can alter not only tokens, but you can alter tiles as well. And Monk included some helpful things here where you can type in like STR and you can find strength values. So you can increase values. I think it even supports rolls. So I think I can do something like a D6 or 1D6 and I'll add to that. But you'll have to experiment with that. It's again a little bit more of an advanced feature, but super powerful. You can add it to chat. Some of these things will actually be added, able to be added to chat so that you as a GM or your players can see what was happening and that somebody, got this alteration or enhancement. You can have attacks automatically occur. You do have to have the token on the board who's going to be doing the attack. And then this is smart enough to, if I had a token selected, it would select the attacks available from that token. So this is another way you can automate traps. So I've heard, I haven't tested it yet though. You can change permissions, extremely helpful. You select an entity, it can be like a journal entry, for example, or an item. You can automatically give permission to the triggering player to have that item. So they'll see it show up in their sidebar. And you can give them different types of permissions. So super flexible. And when you're trying to automate things, this is really, really helpful. You can change your scene. So once they click on it, it could change to another scene. It might be just a scene where you've got an image that everyone's looking at. Or you can actually have that scene activate. So it just picks from all the scenes that you might have in your world, and you can have them automatically go there and activate the scene. You can change door states. So this is super helpful if you want to lock all the doors or unlock doors or create puzzles and traps and things that players would have to find. For example, a lever, click on it, and it can unlock or open doors. Really helpful chat message. You can send chat messages as players or not as players. You can send it to everyone or just the token owner. Super helpful for letting people know when you've automated things and you want them to sort of see it in the chat. You can create tokens. You can actually select an entity from, let's say a list of monsters that you've got ready to go. You can dictate where they're going to materialize, and then you can basically create them. And then of course you can add another automation step to add them to combat. So you can really get detailed with this and do some fun things for creating tokens. You can also make it so it's created invisibly in case you don't want to unleash that token on the players until maybe you sort of manually assigned it to combat or whatever you want to do with it. Elevation is super helpful to change the player's elevation. It's great for tactical maps. It's also really helpful if you're using levels enabled maps like the one you're seeing here that's got 2, 3, 4, or 5 stories of map that they can navigate. You can change players' elevation. This is helpful when you don't want to just use the, levels has a very convenient way to build staircases to go straight up or straight down. If you want to go up but then over, you can't do that with levels. So this is a great tool to be able to change elevation, but then add another step that moves the player to a different location. So you can really move in all 360 degrees, in space. You can have players be hurt or healed. So maybe you have a healing potion or a healing fountain or something like that the players can walk into. You can limit it to just once per player on this other screen over here. And so that can be really super easy and helpful. You can move tokens to other parts of the map. I haven't used this a lot because I prefer to use the teleport function, which does, I think, the same and more than move. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Monk will tell me other use cases for it. You can automatically open journal or actor sheets. Great if your players walk into a certain area and you want to show them something. You can pan the canvas. So you can pan the canvas just for the triggering player or just players or everyone. It'll immediately draw people's attention to a certain area. Maybe you have something else happening over there. One of the critical ones is pausing the game. So being able to pause the game instantly or after a few seconds. Often if you're doing things like automation, you don't want players to continue to move. You want to have them stop and say, look, you're in a new area, or you've landed in a trap and things like that. So I use that very often. Play animation will actually play animated tiles. So it can be either the tile that they walk over, in case you've made that the active tile, or it can be a tile somewhere else in the scene. I'll show you an example of that with traps here in a second. And you can have it start, stop, or pause the animation. And you can have it do it for everybody or just the player. Super flexible, super great. You can play a sound. I use this all the time also. You can restrict that sound just to the token owner. Restrict it just to the scene. You can set its volume. You can loop it. Super helpful stuff, which I'll show you examples of today. Resetting the fog of war can be really great if you want players to get lost in a particular map, or if you've got some changes or things you're doing in the map where you automatically want to reset that fog of war. That can be really, really helpful. You can also reset the tile history. We didn't go through that, but each tile has a history of when it was triggered. And there's, I believe there's reasons to use this, especially when you're passing arguments, but we'll get into that in another future tutorial. You can roll off of a roll table. If I had roll tables in this world, you'd see them all populate here, and you can do it publicly, privately, self-roll. Really, really great stuff. You can also run a macro. So as if the flexibility wasn't enough, you can just run macros. And so you can run any macro that's in your world. You just pick it and it'll run it. I'm going to show you examples of how I do that with a very advanced trap later today. You can send a notification. Also very, very helpful. Something happens, maybe the player's not looking at their chat, but you can send a toast message saying you've sprung a trap or you've got an item, that sort of thing. And you can send it to everyone or just the owner or just you as the GM if you want to know that something happened. You can show and hide all different kinds of entities, the players themselves, other NPCs. You can hide tiles, you can hide all kinds of stuff. Either show, hide, or toggle that visibility. I'll use this all the time as well. Stop token movement is another critical one. You can snap them to grid, so when they stop, they're in a discrete square. But what's really great about this is it doesn't just stop them if you arrow key into the space, but if you just try to drag a token across, it'll stop them. That's really important for traps, because you never know how your players are navigating mechanically the scene. They might be using their mouse to drag their tokens. And so this will make sure that their token stops and actually triggers that tile, whether it be a trap or something else. You can also stop sounds. So we played sounds earlier. Now we can stop those sounds as well. Not just ambient sounds, but we can actually drill into sounds that maybe we've started earlier through a tile. We can stop all those sounds here. That's important if you do things, which I'll show you today, like some looping sounds that you want to have quit after a certain point. Teleport is hugely helpful. It's probably a replacement to multi-level token, and you'll see me start to use this more and more often. It's just a lot more flexible. There's a lot of things you can do with it. And of course, you can link to it and string together any number of arguments. So you can add things like macros and other things that normally you were kind of limited with multi-level token. Now you're unencumbered and you can add all kinds of things to your teleport. You can snap to grid. We'll talk about deleting the source token, which is important. I'll give you examples of teleport today. And so, because that's going to be a common use case, I think, that you'll use active tiles. And then finally, you can trigger another tile. And this is where you can get into really crazy stuff where you're, cascading triggers and commands around the map. And I've already seen some people build some pretty amazing stuff with, linking together triggered tiles. So anyway, that's the basics. Let's go ahead and jump into, actually how to build some of these things. So what we're going to do here is we have this kitchen inside of this tavern area, and let me show you the floor here. And when we go into the pantry, there's a cellar door that we want to have us to automatically teleport us down. And in the margins of this scene, I have a basement. And this basement has other stores and ale and things like that. We want it to teleport us down there, play a little sound of footsteps walking, and then we want to be able to teleport back the other direction. So let's see how we made this. This is a floor tile, or it's a background tile, if you will. And it's got two really simple settings. First of all, it's active. Any token can trigger it. It happens 100% of the time. And what it'll do is it'll play a sound. So we have play sound. I've selected a sound from my Towns compendium, which is the sound of footsteps, steps down in this case. It only plays the sound for the token owner because I don't really feel like I need everyone to hear that particular token steps. So we'll just play it for them. And since it's just for them, I don't really care about everything else. I'm not going to try to set it on loop or set its volume at all. And then the other thing it does is it teleports. So this teleports to a particular set of coordinates. In this case, the coordinates are here where the basement is. So I can also do this another way. So first of all, I'm snapping to grid because I want my token to show up evenly in a square. And I can select coordinates if I want to, or I can actually select a tile. In this case, I'll select a tile. You can see it set the coordinates to this particular tile. If I didn't want a tile, I'd have to move the tiles out of the way, and I would just use the crosshairs to pick an empty space on the map where it wasn't colliding with anything. Update that, update this here, and we'll have our player step in. You heard the sound effects, they're now on the new tile, and now they're in the basement. I could have also set this to change the player's elevation. Let's say this basement was at a different elevation. I could have added a step to change their elevation, and that's exactly what would have happened. Now let's look at the reverse. Same exact settings. Also have the steps. And I'm going to teleport them to this tile this time. Teleport is instant, and I'm here. Notice I did use teleport in this case. I didn't use move. Move will, I believe it really kind of shows your player moving around the map. I haven't used it a whole lot, but teleport is sort of an instant teleport, and it also works with other scenes. If I wanted to, I could have gone to a totally different scene, like this one here. Picked a random location here where I want the player to go to. I also want to delete the source token. And if I go to my other scene, I find them here. It's important to delete that source token. Otherwise, it'll leave a copy of that token in the original scene, which may not be your intended behavior. So now let's look at a more complicated tile. Here's a tile that I will usually have inactive unless my players discover the manhole and they make proper checks to open it up. But this allows all tokens to enter, anyone controlling them, 100% of the time. And let's walk through all the logic. So what this thing does is, first of all, it plays a sound for the token owner. This is going to play a door, it's basically a door grinding, and that's the sound of the manhole cover coming off. It's going to play it just for the token owner in this case, just because it's a loud sound. I don't need it to play it for everybody. And that's kind of step one. And then also for the token owner, after about 3 seconds, it's going to play the sound of wading through water. And it's going to loop that sound. And then after 6 seconds, it's going to stop that sound. So it's going to stop any sounds from tiles. So I don't want it just all ambient sounds, just the tile sounds that we're playing. And just this tile that was triggered. And it's just going to stop playing for the token owner. So that's who I played it for in the first place. Next thing it's going to do is teleport the tokens to a particular tile. It's going to snap them to grid, and it's going to do it after 7 seconds. So this is going to, and by the way, I'm going to avoid other tokens in the destination. This is going to allow all of those sounds time to play, and really imply that this player is really kind of trudging through the sewers before they get to this secret door over here, this kind of back entrance, underground entrance to the magic shop. So I've used this token as its destination, and that's where they'll go. Notice I also stopped token movement. So you'll find if you don't do that, your token will run right across it, and especially a player is not expecting it, and they won't notice that something's happening. So if you stop their movement, it'll stop their token as they're entering it. Almost done. It's going to play that sound after 6 seconds. It's going to play the sound of walking upstairs. So you can see all the timing. It's going to take them about 7 seconds to get to the other side. Just before that happens, you'll hear them walking up the stairs, and it'll also stop playing any sounds once they get there, just to make sure that all sounds are stopped after 8 seconds. So that's how you can link multiple things together for a more interesting teleport. Next up is we're going to do this hey wait tile here. You notice it didn't work, and that's because of the settings I have for this. In this case, I have it set to deactivate, so I'm going to toggle it back on, and let's look at the configuration for it. So any token entering will trigger this, and it'll deactivate after 3 seconds. I'll explain what I mean by that, but essentially it'll deactivate this tile after 3 seconds. I have that set up just in case multiple tokens are crossing over at the same time. I'm also stopping token movement. I'm going to snap to grid. So they'll stop, but they'll stop right on a particular grid square. I'm going to pause the game immediately. I'm going to send a chat message to everyone. It says something doesn't smell right. And it'll say that the particular token pauses the game. So whatever player that was pauses the game. Something doesn't smell right is what they say. The triggering token does it. They'll say it in character so that that statement will look like it came from them, and it'll post to everybody. And then on top of that, in case they're not looking at their chat, I also send a notification just to the token owner that said you entered a new area, game is paused. And I give it the warning color versus like the error or info color. And so that lets me essentially pause the entire game, just like Hey Wait would. But it lets me add some other cool elements like the statements and the notifications and things like that. So here, something doesn't smell right. And what I have in here is a quick encounter already set up where there's a bunch of assassins that have occupied this space. Now we're going to look at this trap. So in order to see this, I'm actually going to drag some of these pieces clear of the building. So here's the trap tile itself. And then there's this special tile here, which I'll explain in a second. And there's also a light. This light happens to be turned off at the moment. So let's examine how this trap works. And by the way, active tiles does respect levels, so you can have a tile triggered only on a certain level, like you see here. It's on the 3rd floor of this particular building. If I go into the triggers, you can see there's a lot happening here. So first of all, there's a special tile, which I told you about before, and you can't see it here, but I'll unhide it and I'll play it. This is a tile from Gorgon. This is one of his flamethrower tiles, and that's essentially what we've got there. I'll show you how this is set up. The animation is set to loop, but it does not autoplay. And it is set up as a overhead tile because it's on another floor. It's going from floor level 20 to 29, and that's essentially it. You have to make sure Z-index is proper so you can see it on the floor that you're on. But that tile has a ID, and when I place it into the scene, it inherits this ID. This ID changes anytime you drag that tile into another scene. It'll have a unique tile ID for that scene. So what I want for this tile to do is to show, in this case I've set show and hide, so this is going to show this particular tile. Notice I clicked out, so there's nothing was selected, and when I click this, it says, great, I've got your tile now. And I'll say update. You can see that's the same tile ID that's referenced later. So not only am I going to show that tile, because right now I'll have a default to hidden, I'm going to start to animate that tile as well. So I'm going to play animation. I've selected my tile already. I'm going to have that animation either start, pause, or stop. In this case, I want it to start. And I want it to play for everyone, not just the triggering player. Then I want to stop that animation. So I pick play animation again. This time I'm going to stop it, and I'll stop it for everyone. But I'm going to do it after 6 seconds. So remember, it'll play it and loop it for 6 seconds. Next thing I want to do is I want to play a sound. So in this case, I have a flamethrower sound in my town compendium, so I'm going to reference that. I restrict it just to the scene. I'm going to play it for everybody. Not going to try to adjust volume or loop it here. I'm also, at the same time, going to activate an ambient light. And those work in the same way. They have their own entities. So if you click your entity selector, go to your lights thing there, I can select my ambient light there, and I want to say I want to activate it. In here, I'm going to do the same thing. Select that entity. Now I'm going to deactivate it after 6 seconds. So 6 seconds is how long I want everything to play for. This light just basically illuminates the area, it illuminates the player. It gives it kind of a cool effect. I also, of course, want to stop the token movement, snap it to grid, because this is a trap. So I want them to, whether they're passing over it or arrow keying into it, I want it to stop their movement. Of course, I want it to pause the game. I don't want them to start moving again right after. There's a lot of things going on. All of a sudden, the building's going to get lit by fire. So I want that to pause the game immediately. I'm going to send a chat message to everybody that says that this person in character sprung a trap. The speaker is going to be the triggering token, and it's going to let everybody know that the trap was sprung. Maybe I also want to have damage rolls and things like that. That's another reason why I want to pause. I'm going to then, after 6 seconds, I'm going to hide that animated tile. So no matter what, the tile is then going to be hidden, so you won't see it continue to animate. I'm going to send a notification to the owner, so with a warning color that you sprung a trap, just to make sure they know that it happened. And then the very last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a macro. Now I have a very special macro called Set Ablaze. This is a macro that I developed using token magic effects and with FX Master, and that's what caused the building and the environment to light on fire.
I've got another tutorial where I teach you guys how I do this, but essentially it's going to light that macro on fire. Now, it's going to activate that set ablaze macro. I'm going to update my tile. I just want to show you here really quickly. You can't see it, but there's an invisible drawing here. And that drawing has its line set to 0. Its fill is set to 0 opacity, but it's got this very special hex code. And there's similar drawings to that elsewhere in this warehouse. They all look invisible to you now, but what the macro does, I'll just open up the set ablaze macro so you can see. It looks for that particular hex code, and then it sets the fill alpha to 50%. And that drawing already has a token magic effects filter on it. So again, I'm not going to go into too much detail. You can look at setting things on fire tutorial if you want to see how I did that. That's sort of the ultimate piece here to this. And then when you bring it all together, everything plays. Of course, I have these tiles. I drag them to a different area. This would be down here just a little bit more. But essentially, it lit everything on fire. It called out the macro. All of these drawings that were hidden are now visible, and they look like flames are licking all of the boxes and whatnot. And you can even set them at different levels. So, I've got fire spreading all the way down into the downstairs. And then the environment itself has all of the smoke and embers. And that comes from the FX Master module that does that. And then of course I have this douse. So if the player should happen to put it out, or just later, I can hit my douse macro. And what it essentially does is it rehides all of those drawings that you saw earlier. And eventually you'll see all of this ambient weather will go away and everything will go back to normal. Next up, I'll show you how to pass an item. So I'm on my ground floor and I have this item here. What I did was I opened up Molinet. I did a search for staff and I found all these great staffs. Here's a bunch from Forgotten Adventures. This one happens to be a Tom Kartos staff, which I'm not logged into my Patreon to get it, but this is essentially where that came from. And it's got just a glow filter, which is a token magic effects filter applied to it. Let's open up this tile and see how it's configured. So there's 3 things happening here. First of all, I'm adding the item Staff of the Magi to the triggering token. So you pick add item. The triggering token is who I want to do it. And then I pick my Staff of the Magi by doing select an entity, going over here and picking the staff. That will assign that staff then to my inventory. Next thing I want to do is I want to hide this tile because I don't want it to happen more than once. So once I've selected it, it'll put my inventory and it'll hide the tile. I can also select this here once per token just to make sure that I don't get more than one. And then the last thing I do is send a notification. So it says you've got a staff, and I send it just to the token owner, and it's an info notification. And the last thing I didn't show you here is how it gets triggered. It has to be clicked. So anyone who clicks on it can get the staff. Now, of course, I don't have to have the staff visible. See, I just clicked on it. So I had my player selected, I clicked on this, and it gave me the staff. And if I open up my player, I've done this once already before, but I have Staff of the Magi now in my inventory. And you'll also notice that the staff is hidden. So my player can no longer see the staff or interact with it. So that's it. I hope you guys saw that we just, scratched the surface on what active tiles can do. These are some really common use cases that you'll use probably a lot, but you guys will be able to think of some pretty crazy stuff. There's just the ability to link actions together in a smart way without having to know how to write macros is really powerful because it lets any of us create very complex, smart scenes and assets and prefabs without knowing how to code on the back end. So yeah, hopefully you guys have fun with this. Let me know in the comments if you think of other really cool stuff. I'm going to make some of my active tile things available, at least to my Patreon, maybe to probably some to the rest of you as well. I'm going to use the config presets from Ripper to be able to copy some of these things, and I'll start making a library of presets that you guys might be able to use in case you just want out of the box, like how do you make certain things work. So keep an eye out for that. And again, let me know in the comments if you guys have other ideas on things that you can create with active tiles. This won't be my last active tiles tutorial because there's just so much to do with this that you'll see me use it for quite a bit more into the future. So that's it. Thanks everybody and have fun making your maps.